The moment I stepped off the transport truck, I knew something was wrong. The air felt heavier, like the weight of the place itself was pressing down on me. The sky, an endless stretch of dull gray, seemed unnaturally still, as if the clouds were holding their breath. A thick silence hung over the landscape, broken only by the occasional distant hum, like a low-frequency vibration that I couldn't quite place. I adjusted the strap of my rifle and glanced around. This wasn't like any other military base I'd been stationed at before. I had been sent here on short notice. No details, no briefing, just orders. Pack your gear, soldier. You're being reassigned. That was all they told me. I didn't ask questions. In the military, you learn quickly that some things are above your pay grade. But as the truck pulled through the gates, past the high fences topped with razor wire, I felt something gnawing at the edge of my mind. A deep, instinctive warning. The base wasn't large. A handful of concrete buildings, a few watchtowers, and a single airstrip that looked like it hadn't been used in years. The only noticeable structure was a squat, windowless bunker in the center of the compound. It looked old, its thick steel doors reinforced and locked tight. That was the first thing that caught my attention. Every base had restricted areas, sure, but this bunker was different. The way the guards stationed around it stood rigid, their eyes constantly scanning, made my skin crawl. A sergeant with a weathered face and cold eyes met me as I stepped off the truck. His uniform was clean, but his expression carried the weariness of someone who had seen too much. "Welcome to Outpost 47, he said flatly, not offering his hand. "You follow orders here. No questions. No wandering." "Understood." He nodded. "Understood." He gave me a long look, then motioned for me to follow. As we walked through the base, I noticed something strange. The other soldiers, what few there were, moved with an uneasy caution, like they were always listening for something. Their faces were pale, their eyes sunken. I caught the glance of one young private as he passed me. His expression was pure exhaustion. No, not just exhaustion. Fear. The barracks were basic but clean. I was assigned a bunk, given a brief rundown of my duties. Routine patrols, watch shifts, basic security work. Standard stuff. But there was one rule the sergeant made clear before he left me for the night. "You don't go near the bunker," he said, his voice low, almost like he was warning me. "Stay away from it. No matter what you see or hear." I wanted to ask why, but the look in his eyes stopped me. That first night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The base was quiet, unnervingly so. Even in remote posts, you hear something. Chatter, radios, the sound of boots on gravel. But here, it was as if the entire place was holding its breath. Then, sometime past midnight, I heard it. A deep, low sound, like a distant groan of shifting metal. It came from the direction of the bunker. I sat up, my pulse quickening. The noise wasn't natural. It had a strange resonance, something that sent a chill through my spine. I glanced around. None of the other soldiers reacted. They were all awake. I could see the dim glow of someone's cigarette, hear the slow, restless shifting of bodies. But no one spoke. No one even acknowledged the sound. It was like they had learned to ignore it. Or maybe they were too afraid to respond. The next few days only deepened the mystery. Every time I patrolled the perimeter, my eyes drifted toward the bunker. It was always locked, always guarded. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside was awake, watching. Then, on my third night, something changed. The alarms blared at exactly 2:13 a.m. A harsh, shrieking sound that sent every soldier scrambling. I jumped from my bunk, grabbing my rifle as I rushed outside. The sergeant was already barking orders, his voice barely cutting through the chaos. But my eyes weren't on him. They were on the bunker. The steel doors were open. Just a crack, but enough to see that something inside was moving. Something that shouldn't have been there. And then the power cut out. The darkness swallowed the base in an instant, and in that silence, I heard it again. A sound so unnatural, so impossibly wrong, that my body locked up in fear. And that's when I realized, whatever we were guarding, it wasn't human. The darkness stretched on longer than it should have. I gripped my rifle tight, my breath coming in short, shallow bursts as my eyes struggled to adjust. Around me, I could hear the hurried movements of the other soldiers, boots scraping against the gravel, quiet curses muttered under their breath. No one spoke louder than necessary. It was like we all knew. Whatever had just happened, whatever had come from that bunker, we didn't want to draw attention to ourselves. The sound I heard, low, unnatural, was still ringing in my ears. It hadn't been mechanical, not the whine of failing equipment or the groan of shifting metal. No, this was different. It was deep, resonant, like something vast and ancient breathing beneath the earth. Then the emergency lights flickered on. A weak red glow washed over the base, casting long shadows that made everything feel worse. It was better than the pitch black, but just barely. The guards by the bunker were still there, rifles raised, their bodies stiff with tension. The doors remained slightly open, revealing nothing but blackness inside. "Everyone hold your positions," the sergeant barked, his voice sharp and commanding, but I could hear the edge of unease in it. "Do not engage unless ordered." My heart pounded as I stepped closer, just enough to see what was happening. A figure emerged from the bunker, one of ours, a soldier in full gear, staggering slightly. His name patch read Cooper. His face was pale, sweat dripping down his temples despite the cold night air. His rifle hung loose in his grip, like he'd forgotten he was holding it. "Cooper," the sergeant called, stepping forward. "Report." The soldier didn't answer. He kept walking, slow and unsteady, his eyes unfocused. Then, just as the sergeant reached for him, Cooper dropped to his knees and vomited onto the gravel. A medic rushed forward, but before they could get close, Cooper let out a strangled, gasping sound. "Close it." His voice was hoarse, broken. "Close the doors. Now." The sergeant hesitated for only a second before barking orders to seal the bunker. The guards moved fast, pushing the heavy doors shut with a deep, echoing thud. The locking mechanisms engaged with a mechanical whine, and then there was silence. Cooper collapsed onto his side, his body trembling. The medic crouched next to him, checking his vitals. I stayed where I was, watching, my mind racing. What had he seen in there? The sergeant turned to the rest of us. "Back to your post. Now." No one argued. Whatever this was, it wasn't meant for us to know. I returned to the barracks, but sleep was impossible. The sound from the bunker still echoed in my head, that deep, resonating hum. I tried to shake it off, but something about it lingered, a weight in my chest that I couldn't explain. The next morning, Cooper was gone. No explanation, no announcement. Just gone. His bunk was stripped bare, like he had never been there at all. When I asked another soldier about it, he only shook his head. "Forget about it," he muttered. "Just do your job." That was easier said than done. Over the next few days, the base's routine returned to normal, at least on the surface. But I started noticing things. Soldiers whispering in hushed voices when they thought no one was listening. Nervous glances toward the bunker, even when we were nowhere near it. The sergeant, usually firm and steady, had a stiffness to him now, like he was constantly waiting for something to go wrong. And then there were the nights. Every night, around the same time, the base would fall into an unnatural stillness. The wind would die down. The usual sounds of the night, crickets, distant engines, even the faint buzz of the security lights, would fade into silence. And then, without fail, the noise would start again. That deep, impossible hum. No one spoke about it. No one acknowledged it. But I knew they all heard it. I thought about writing it off as paranoia, maybe exhaustion. But then, on my 5th night at the base, I saw something that made any doubt vanish. It was past midnight. I was on patrol near the perimeter fence when I noticed movement near the bunker. At first, I thought it was just another soldier, maybe one of the guards on duty. But as I stepped closer, I realized something was off. The figure was standing too still, its posture unnaturally rigid. Then it moved, slowly, in a way that sent a cold shiver down my spine. Its head tilted just slightly like it was listening for something. I raised my rifle, my pulse hammering. "Who's there?" called, keeping my voice steady. No response. I took a cautious step forward. The red emergency lights cast flickering shadows across the compound, and for a moment, the figure was lost in the darkness. Then, suddenly, it was closer. I didn't see it move. It was just there. I sucked in a sharp breath. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my training kept me rooted. I tightened my grip on my weapon. "Identify yourself." The figure took another step forward, and the light caught its face. It wasn't a soldier. It wasn't anything I could recognize. Its features were blurred, indistinct, like I was looking at something that didn't belong in the space it was occupying. My vision swam just trying to focus on it. Then it spoke. Not in words, not in any language I knew. The sound was the same as the noise from the bunker. Deep, resonant, something that I felt in my bones more than I heard with my ears. My breath hitched. My body locked up. The figure tilted its head again, and for one horrifying moment, I thought it was going to step closer. But then the emergency lights flickered again, just for a second. When they stabilized, the figure was gone. I stood frozen, my rifle still raised, my mind scrambling to make sense of what I had just seen. I wanted to believe it was a trick of the light, exhaustion, stress, but deep down I knew better. Something was wrong with this place. Something was inside that bunker. And whatever it was, it wasn't staying inside anymore. I barely slept after that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure, its blurred, shifting face, the way it moved, the way it just disappeared. But more than that, I kept hearing the sound. That deep, vibrating hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Even when the bass was quiet, it lingered in my chest, like an echo I couldn't shake. The next morning I tried to act normal, tried to convince myself that maybe I had imagined it. Maybe I was just exhausted, on edge because of the base's strange atmosphere. But when I stepped outside, I knew right away that something had changed. The other soldiers were tense, even more than usual. No one was talking. They moved through their routines like shadows, avoiding eye contact, avoiding conversation. Even the sergeant, who normally kept everything locked down tight, looked unsettled. And then I saw the perimeter guards. There were more of them now, stationed along the fence in pairs, rifles held tight in their grips. Their eyes scanned the area constantly, their movements sharp and deliberate. Something had happened. I approached one of the guards near the mess hall, a guy named Ortiz. He was younger than me, maybe early 20s, but his hands were shaking as he held his coffee. "What's going on?" I asked, keeping my voice low. He looked at me, then at the others around us, like he was debating whether or not to say anything. Finally, he exhaled sharply. "Patrol team found something near the south perimeter this morning," he muttered. I frowned. "Found what?" Ortiz hesitated. Then he pulled out his phone, checked his surroundings again, and turned the screen toward me. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. The image was grainy, taken just before sunrise, but the shapes were clear enough. The fence, the dirt, the empty landscape beyond the base. And then, in the center of the frame, footprints. Dozens of them. They were human-shaped but wrong. The proportions were slightly off, the spacing unnatural, as if whatever had made them didn't walk the way we did. "They weren't there last night," Ortiz whispered. "No one saw anything, no alarms, nothing. But they go all the way up to the fence. Then they just stop." I stared at the image, my mind racing. "Stop." Ortiz nodded. No turning back, no leading away. Just gone. A cold wave of unease crawled up my spine. Didn't make sense. Even if someone had approached the fence in the middle of the night, there should have been tracks leading away. But there weren't. I thought about what I had seen near the bunker, the way the figure had moved, the way it had just disappeared when the lights flickered. Before I could say anything else, the sergeant's voice rang out. "Briefing in 10 minutes. Everyone inside." Ortiz and I exchanged a glance before heading toward the main building. The entire unit gathered in the briefing room, standing shoulder to shoulder in the tight space. The air felt heavy, thick with unspoken tension. The sergeant stood at the front, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "Last night we had an anomaly," he said, his voice even. "Patrols reported unexplained activity near the perimeter. No breaches, no injuries, but we're increasing security. From now on, night patrols will be doubled. No one goes anywhere alone." A murmur passed through the room, low and uneasy. "Sir," one of the corporals spoke up, "what exactly are we dealing with here?" The sergeant's jaw tightened. "That's classified." That word, classified, made my stomach twist. The corporal wasn't satisfied. "With all due respect, sir, we're the ones stationed here. If there's a threat—" "There is no threat," the sergeant cut him off. "We maintain protocol. We follow orders. That's all you need to know." I glanced around the room, saw the doubt in everyone's eyes. They weren't buying it. Whatever was happening, it wasn't normal, and we all knew it. The briefing ended soon after, but the tension didn't fade. If anything, it got worse. By the time night fell, the base felt like a pressure cooker. The air was thick with anticipation, like everyone was waiting for something to happen. I was assigned to the Eastern Perimeter Patrol with another soldier, Dunbar. He was older, quiet, the kind of guy who didn't say much unless he had to. We walked in silence for the first half of our shift, the gravel crunching under our boots. The red emergency lights cast long, flickering shadows across the ground, making everything look distorted, unreal. "You feel that?" Dunbar muttered after a while. He nodded. I knew exactly what he meant. The air felt wrong. Not just cold, but heavy, charged with something I couldn't explain. We kept moving, scanning the area, our rifles at the ready. But the longer we walked, the more I felt it, like we were being watched. Then, just past the halfway point of our patrol, we heard it. That sound. The low, humming vibration that seemed to come from the ground itself. Froze. Dunbar did too. We exchanged a glance, gripping our weapons tighter. Then I saw movement near the fence. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the shadows. But then it moved again, slow, deliberate. I lifted my rifle, my pulse hammering. "Who's there?" No answer. Dunbar reached for his radio. "Control, this is East Patrol. We have movement near the perimeter." Static. The radio was dead. And then the lights flickered. The moment they did, the figure was closer. It wasn't walking. It wasn't running. It was just there. The same blurred face, the same unnatural posture. Dunbar raised his weapon, but I grabbed his arm. "Wait," I whispered. "It's not." The lights flickered again. And suddenly, it wasn't alone. There were more of them now, standing just beyond the fence. 5, 6, maybe more. Their forms shifted in and out of focus, like they weren't fully here. My chest tightened. I didn't know what I was looking at. I didn't know what they wanted. And then, in the same deep, resonant hum, they spoke. Not words. Not language. A sound. But I understood. Message. A warning. Something was coming. And whatever was in that bunker, it wasn't staying locked up much longer. The air around us seemed to thicken, pressing against my skin like an invisible weight. The figures by the fence stood motionless, their shifting forms flickering in and out of focus. Dunbar gripped his rifle so tightly I could hear his fingers straining against the metal. I wanted to move, to step back, to do anything, but I couldn't. It was like my body refused to respond. The sound, the deep humming vibration, grew louder, sinking into my bones, rattling my skull. It wasn't just noise. It was something else. Presence. Force. Dunbar's breathing turned shallow. "We need to." Before he could finish, the lights flickered again. The moment they did, the figures shifted. Not forward, not backward, just different. Like they had rearranged themselves in an instant, bypassing the need to move. Now they were closer. Too close. I forced my body to step back, dragging Dunbar with me. His legs felt like stone. His gaze locked onto the nearest figure. "We need to move," I whispered, barely able to hear my own voice over the pulsing hum. Then the radio crackled to life. It wasn't static this time. It was voices, dozens of them. Muted, overlapping, whispering in a language I didn't recognize. The words scraped against my mind like something ancient and foreign. I couldn't understand them, but I felt them. Dunbar fumbled with his radio, but all he got was more of those layered, ghostly voices. He looked at me, his eyes wide with something I had never seen in them before, fear. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the sound stopped. Silence crashed down around us, thick and absolute. Even the usual night sounds, the wind, the distant hum of machinery, were gone. The air was too still, the world too quiet. I turned my gaze back toward the fence. The figures were gone. No slow retreat, no movement. Just gone. I exhaled a shaky breath, my pulse hammering against my ribs. Dunbar took a step back, then another. We needed to get back to the main compound. We needed to tell someone what we had seen. We turned and started moving fast, keeping our rifles at the ready. The silence followed us, unnatural and suffocating. Every step felt too loud, like we were disturbing something that wasn't meant to be touched. By the time we reached the main barracks, we were both drenched in sweat despite the cold night air. I expected someone to stop us to ask what had happened, but the base was eerily empty. The usual guards weren't at their posts. No one was outside. The doors to the main building were slightly ajar, swinging faintly in the breeze. I exchanged a glance with Dunbar. He nodded, tightening his grip on his rifle, and we stepped inside. The lights flickered above us, casting the hallway in short, disorienting bursts of brightness. The place should have been filled with soldiers, people moving between shifts, officers handling reports. But it wasn't. It was silent. A faint metallic scent hung in the air, sharp and bitter. My stomach twisted. Something was wrong. We moved cautiously, checking each room as we passed. Every single one. Bunk beds untouched. Equipment neatly stored, as if everyone had just disappeared into thin air. Then, from deeper within the building, we heard it. A single distant footstep. Dunbar froze. I felt every muscle in my body go rigid. Another footstep. Closer. Low. Deliberate. I raised my rifle, training it toward the sound. Who's there? No response. The hallway stretched ahead of us, lined with doors that led to briefing rooms, offices, storage areas. The footstep came again, closer still. But we couldn't see anyone. Dunbar reached for his radio again, but all that came through was static. Then, just on the edge of my hearing beneath the static, I heard it. Name. Spoken in my own voice. I jerked the radio away from my ear, my skin crawling. The words had been soft, almost gentle, but they hadn't come from me. I looked at Dunbar, but his expression told me he had heard it too. Then, just as quickly as before, the sound stopped. The air pressed in around us, heavier than before. My instincts screamed at me to move, to get out, to run, but I didn't know where to go. Then the emergency alarm blared to life. The sudden noise was deafening, echoing through the empty halls. Red warning lights flashed, painting everything in sharp, jagged shadows. Over the alarm, the PA system crackled, and a distorted voice came through. All personnel. Report to evacuation points. This is not a drill. The voice was wrong. It sounded mechanical, but underneath it, something else lurked. Something strained, stretched, like the words were being forced out through a broken machine. Then the message repeated. Dunbar grabbed my arm. We need to go. Now. We took off, moving fast through the halls, past the empty rooms, past the doors that now seemed too dark, too open. Every flickering light made the shadows shift, and I felt like something was watching us from every corner. When we finally burst out into the open air, I expected chaos. Soldiers moving, vehicles loading up, officers barking orders. Instead, the base was still. The alarm still blared, the red lights still flashed, but there was no one. No trucks. No soldiers. Just us. My breath came fast and shallow. This wasn't possible. There had been people here just hours ago. A fully staffed military base didn't just empty out in the middle of the night. Dunbar turned in a slow circle, his rifle raised, his movements tense. "Where is everyone?" I didn't have an answer. Then, from the far end of the compound near the bunker, something moved. At first, I thought it was another one of those shifting figures. But as it stepped into the flashing red light, I realized it was something else. Someone else. Soldier. Not just any soldier. Cooper. The same man who had vanished days ago without a word. He stood motionless, his eyes wide, unblinking. His uniform was torn, stained with something dark. His expression was blank, his face pale as death. But it was his mouth that made my blood run cold. It was moving, not speaking, repeating the same words over and over again, in a voice that wasn't his. "This is not a drill. This is not a drill." Then, as the lights flickered one last time, the bunker doors behind him began to open. A deep, mechanical groan echoed through the night as the bunker doors slid open, the heavy steel grinding against itself. Cold air rushed outward, carrying with it a strange, sterile scent mixed with something else, something metallic like rusted iron or blood. The red emergency lights flickered, casting jagged shadows across Cooper's face as he continued to whisper the same phrase over and over. Dunbar took a step back, his rifle raised, his body rigid with tension. "Cooper." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Can you hear me?" Cooper didn't respond. His lips moved, but his eyes, they were empty. Hollow. Like he wasn't really there anymore. Then something shifted in the darkness behind him. A shadow, too large to be a person, moved just beyond the open bunker doors. It was subtle, just a shift of shape in the dim light, but I felt it. Presence. Something watching. My pulse pounded against my ribs. "Dunbar, we need to go." But before either of us could move, Cooper's whispering stopped. The silence that followed was unbearable, thick and unnatural. Then slowly Cooper's head tilted. His neck bent at an unnatural angle. His mouth stretched wider than it should have. And in a voice that wasn't his, something distorted, layered, filled with something ancient and wrong, he spoke. "It's awake." Then the bunker doors slammed open the rest of the way. A gust of air blasted out, carrying the full force of whatever was inside. My ears popped from the sudden pressure shift, and the emergency lights along the perimeter flickered wildly. The hum, the deep, vibrating sound that had haunted me since I arrived, rose to a deafening pitch. And then, from the darkness inside the bunker, something stepped forward. First I thought it was a man. The silhouette had the right shape. 2 arms, 2 legs, but as it moved into the flashing red light, I realized just how wrong I was. Its body flickered, shifting between solid and translucent, like it wasn't fully in this world. Its limbs were too long, its movements too fluid, unnatural. It wasn't walking, it was gliding, bending and twisting in ways that defied logic. Dunbar cursed under his breath, stumbling back. "What the hell is that?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. My mind was screaming at me to run, to move, to do anything but stand there. But my body wouldn't listen. Cooper turned to face the thing. For a brief moment I thought he was going to react, to fight or run. But instead his body convulsed. His head snapped back, his spine arching unnaturally, and then he dropped to his knees. His mouth opened but no sound came out. His entire body shook, his hands clawing at the ground, his veins bulging beneath his pale skin. And then slowly his body began to lift. Not by his own power. The thing, whatever it was, hadn't touched him. But Cooper was rising off the ground, his arms spread wide, his body suspended in the air like a puppet on invisible strings. Dunbar fired. The gunshot cracked through the air, the muzzle flash lighting up the scene for a split second. The bullet hit Cooper square in the chest, and passed right through him. No blood. No wound. Just empty space where solid flesh should have been. I yanked Dunbar back. "Stop. He's not." I didn't even know what I was trying to say. Nothing made sense. Cooper was still suspended, his body twitching as if something was crawling inside of him, reshaping him from the inside out. Then, just as suddenly as he had risen, he dropped. He hit the ground hard, his body limp, unmoving. And the thing behind him took another step forward. The hum grew louder, pressing into my skull, vibrating through my bones. The world around me felt like it was warping, like reality itself was bending in the presence of this entity. Dunbar grabbed my arm. "We have to move. Now." I didn't argue. We turned and ran, sprinting toward the nearest building, our boots pounding against the ground. Behind us, the air crackled with static, and the hum, no, not just a hum anymore, but something deeper, something alive, followed us. The base was still empty. No soldiers. No trucks. Just the flashing emergency lights and the alarms that no one was around to hear. Dunbar slammed through the nearest door, pulling me inside after him. We barricaded it as best we could, shoving a heavy metal desk against it. But I had no idea if it would make a difference. My hands were shaking. My breath was coming too fast. I pressed my back against the wall, my mind struggling to process what we had just seen. Dunbar ran a hand through his short-cropped hair, his chest heaving. That wasn't a man. I shook my head. No. And whatever came out of that bunker. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. We both knew. It wasn't human. I swallowed hard, trying to focus, trying to think. What do we do? Dunbar didn't answer right away. He was staring at the radio on his belt, his expression dark. We need to get out of here. But the base. There is no base, he cut in. Not anymore. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. He was right. The base, the people, it was all gone. And whatever had replaced them, whatever was out there now, wasn't something we could fight. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "'Kay. We find a vehicle. We get off-site. We report this." Dunbar nodded. "Yeah. If there's anything left to report to." For a brief second, neither of us moved. The silence stretched between us, heavy with everything we weren't saying. Then the radio on Dunbar's belt crackled. Voice. Not static this time. Not whispers. Clear. Familiar. My own voice. "Don't leave," it said. Then, just as the radio cut to silence, something knocked on the door. The knock on the door was soft. Soft. Almost polite. But there was something unnatural about it. Like it wasn't made by a fist, but by something imitating the sound. Dunbar and I locked eyes, frozen in place. My breath caught in my throat. Neither of us moved. Another knock. Then a voice. My voice. "Let me in." Cold shiver ran down my spine. Dunbar's grip on his rifle tightened, his knuckles white. The voice wasn't coming from the radio this time. It was outside the door. I shook my head at Dunbar, mouthing, "Don't answer." But we both knew this thing, whatever it was, wasn't fooled. Knew we were here. It had always known. The door handle twisted. Dunbar raised his rifle. I raised mine. But deep down I wasn't sure bullets would do anything. We had already seen what happened when Dunbar shot at Cooper. The bullet had passed straight through like he was a ghost. The handle stopped turning. For a moment everything was still. Then, from the other side of the door, the voice spoke again. "You can't leave." It wasn't just my voice anymore. It was layered, distorted. Dozens of voices underneath it, overlapping. Some were whispers, others barely audible. And buried deep within them was one I recognized. Cooper. Dunbar's jaw clenched. He shook his head, whispering, "Screw this." He turned toward the back of the room, toward the supply closet. I followed, keeping my rifle trained on the door as we moved. Another knock. Harder this time. I swallowed back my fear and forced myself to think. The base was empty. The roads leading out of here were long stretches of open land. There were no trees, no cover. If we ran, we'd be exposed. But staying wasn't an option either. I grabbed Dunbar's arm and whispered, "We can't go through the front." He nodded, already understanding. He moved to the back window, peering outside. The emergency lights flickered across the yard. The open bunker loomed in the distance, a dark wound in the earth. And then, "I see a truck," Dunbar whispered. My heart jumped. Oh, it was parked near the mess hall, maybe 50 yards away. A long run, but our only option. He nodded. "We go on 3. Dunbar took a breath, steadied himself. I turned back toward the door. My gut told me the thing was still there, waiting. 1. The knock came again, harder, like whatever was out there was running out of patience. 2. The handle twisted, but this time it didn't stop. It began to turn all the way. 3. Dunbar shoved the window open, and we scrambled through. The cold air hit my face as my boots hit the dirt. We ran. The alarm still blared. The emergency lights cast wild shadows across the empty base. My heart pounded as we sprinted across the open yard. Every step felt too loud, too slow. Then I heard it. A step. Behind us. Not running, gliding. Moving impossibly fast. We didn't look back. We couldn't. Dunbar reached the truck first, yanking the door open. "Get in." I dove into the passenger seat, slamming the door as Dunbar turned the key. Nothing. The engine clicked, but it wouldn't turn over. "No, no, no," Dunbar muttered, trying again. The lights around us flickered. The humming sound, the deep, bone-rattling vibration, was everywhere now, rising, surrounding us. I dared a glance back toward the bunker. The thing was standing there, watching, and Cooper was beside it. His head was tilted. His mouth was moving. "This is not a drill," he whispered. The truck roared to life. Dunbar didn't hesitate. He floored it, tires kicking up dirt as we sped toward the gate. For the first time all night I thought we might make it. Then the radio crackled. And I heard my own voice say, "You should have stayed." The headlights flickered. The wheel jerked in Dunbar's hands. And suddenly, the world shifted. It wasn't something I could explain. It was like reality folded in on itself. One moment we were speeding toward the exit. The next, we were right back where we started. The truck skidded to a stop in front of the bunker. Dunbar slammed his fists against the wheel. "Whoa. No." My hands shook. My breath was coming too fast. I looked around. The road was gone. The base stretched out endlessly in every direction, repeating itself like a loop. The emergency lights still flickered. The alarm still blared. And outside, standing just feet away from the truck, was me. I was standing there. Not a reflection. Not a shadow. Another me. I couldn't move. The other me tilted its head, studying me with the same confused terror I felt in my own chest. Then its lips parted, and it spoke in my own voice. "We never left." Dunbar was shaking now. "This isn't real." But it was. The truck's radio crackled again, and the voices returned. Layered, whispering, endless. And as they spoke, I finally understood. We had never been guarding the base. We had been inside the experiment the entire time. And there was no way out. Dunbar's breath came in short, ragged bursts as he gripped the wheel tighter, his knuckles white. My pulse was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The figure outside, the other me, hadn't moved. It just stood there, watching, its expression unreadable. I couldn't tell if it was curious, mocking, or just waiting. I forced myself to swallow, my throat dry. "Dunbar," my voice barely came out. "What do we do?" He didn't answer at first. His eyes were locked on the dashboard. His jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might break. Then, slowly, he turned to look at me. There was something in his expression that scared me more than anything else we had seen tonight. He looked like he was giving up. "No," I said, shaking my head. "Oh, don't do that. We're getting out of here." His grip on the wheel loosened. "I don't think we can." I felt panic rising in my chest, but I forced it down. Had to think. There had to be something we weren't seeing. Some way out. My brain raced through everything that had happened. The empty base, the bunker, Cooper, the hum, the way reality itself had shifted when we tried to leave. I looked back at the thing outside. The other me. It was still there. Still waiting. I reached for the door handle. Dunbar's hand shot out, gripping my wrist. "What the hell are you doing?" I met his eyes, trying to steady my voice. This whole time it's been leading us somewhere. Pushing us toward something. What if we're not supposed to run? That's insane. His fingers dug into my skin. That's exactly what it wants. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And I saw the fear in his eyes, the exhaustion, the way his shoulders had slumped just slightly. He was barely holding it together. But I couldn't let that fear control us. I exhaled slowly. I'm not saying I trust it. But we're in a loop, Dunbar. We tried to leave and we ended up right back here. If we keep doing the same thing, we'll get the same result. His jaw worked as he clenched and unclenched it, the muscle twitching. Then finally he let go of my wrist. I swear if you get yourself killed. I forced a weak smile. Then I guess we'll finally have some answers. Before I could second guess myself, I pushed the door open and stepped out. The air was heavy, thick with something unseen, pressing down on my skin like static before a lightning storm. I took a slow, cautious step forward. The other me didn't move. I took another step. My heartbeat felt too loud, my hands trembling. I was only a few feet away now. Close enough to see the details, the way its uniform was identical to mine, the way it breathed in sync with me. But there was something wrong with its eyes. They were just a little too dark, a little too deep, like looking into a void. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The other me blinked, tilting its head slightly. Then, in my own voice it spoke. "I'm what's left." A shiver ran through me, but I held my ground. "What does that mean?" The thing didn't answer right away. Instead, it lifted a hand, slowly, carefully, and pointed. Not at me. The bunker. I turned, following its gaze. The bunker door was still wide open, the darkness inside stretching endlessly. The deep hum pulsed in the air, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. And suddenly I understood. This place, the base, the bunker, everything, it wasn't just some classified experiment gone wrong. It was the experiment. And we were inside it. We had never been guarding it. We had always been inside. I looked back at the other me. "How do we get out?" The figure's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile, or maybe just a cruel imitation of one. "You already know." And just like that it was gone. I blinked, my breath catching in my throat. 1 second it had been standing right in front of me. The next it was just empty space. Like it had never been there at all. Behind me, Dunbar climbed out of the truck. His rifle still in his hands. Where the hell did it go? I shook my head. "It doesn't matter. We need to go into the bunker." He recoiled like I had just slapped him. "Are you out of your damn mind?" "Think about it," I said, turning to face him fully. "If this is a loop, if we're stuck inside whatever this thing is, we have to break the cycle. Running didn't work. Fighting didn't work. That thing just told me we already know how to get out." I swallowed hard. "I think the answer is in the bunker." Dunbar stared at me like he wanted to argue, but deep down I knew he felt it too. Pull. The inevitability of it. Finally, he exhaled sharply. "This is the worst idea I've ever agreed to." "Yeah," I muttered. "Me too." Together we turned toward the bunker and stepped inside. The darkness swallowed us immediately. The hum was louder now, vibrating in my bones. The air felt thick, electric. The walls stretched endlessly, like we had stepped into something much bigger than what should have physically fit beneath the base. Then ahead of us, a light flickered on. "Control panel." Dunbar and I exchanged a look. "Whatever this thing is," I whispered, "it's still running." Dunbar approached the panel cautiously, his fingers hovering over the buttons. "One of these has to shut it down." My stomach twisted. Or make it worse. We didn't have time to second guess. The hum was reaching a fever pitch, and I could feel something shifting around us, like the entire space was collapsing in on itself. Dunbar clenched his jaw. "Screw it." He pressed the button. Everything stopped. The hum. The vibrations. The static in the air. For a split second there was nothing. Just absolute, deafening silence. A bright, blinding flash of light. And suddenly we were back. The base was full again. Soldiers were walking the grounds. Trucks were parked where they should be. The bunker door was sealed. Everything was exactly as it had been before. Dunbar and I stood in the same spot we had been at the start of our shift. It was as if nothing had ever happened. I turned to him, my chest tight. "Do you remember?" He looked at me, his face pale. Yeah, we both did. But no one else seemed to notice. The base continued as normal. No alarms. No missing people. No trace of the nightmare we had just escaped. So, as I glanced toward the bunker one last time, I saw something. Figure. Standing in the shadows. It was me. Watching. Waiting. And then it was gone. I exhaled shakily, turning back to Dunbar. "We're putting in for a transfer." "For once," he muttered, rubbing a hand over his face. "I actually agree with you. We never spoke about that night again. But deep down I knew the truth. Whatever we had been part of, it wasn't over. Not yet."